delegates, colleagues, and attendees. Our theme this year, Realizing the Dream, makes a not so subtle reference to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, delivered 60 years ago this summer. I call it America's most well-known and least well-understood public address. Over the years, it's been distorted, sanitized, and drained of its true radical vision. Despite that, I believe we can now safely say that Dr. King's assertion that the U.S. Constitution was a promissory note which came back marked insufficient funds for its Negro citizens was both accurate and ominous. The truth is, Dr. King believed in reparations. He called for it explicitly up until the last speech of his life. The promissory note, the check that he demanded according to the terms of the U.S. Constitution, was never cashed. And it was 60 years ago until today, the wealth gap between African Americans and white Americans remains exactly the same. So 60 years later, it's up to us to now acknowledge him as the visionary he is, because after all of these years, it's now clear, more clear now than ever before, that reparations is what justice looks like in the 21st century. On December 16th, 2005, the UN General Assembly reaffirmed the importance of providing reparations for gross violations of international human rights law by adopting a 5-point legal framework for reparations, and that has become our norm. That includes monetary compensation proportionate to the gravity of the harms done to our people, restitution, which would include repatriation, reconnection with our identity and our culture, satisfaction or repair for moral and ethical and injury to reputation and mental suffering. That includes apologies, memorials, and the ending of cultural genocide. Guarantees of non-repetition, laws to ensure that the continuation of slavery that in the United States we call mass incarceration would begin to stop. Rehabilitation, including mental health support and medical care to address the inequities that we will describe later on this week. But I would like to ask the question, as we link reparations to the other core idea that brought us here together, the idea of self-determination, why is it that our terms of repair are dictated to us by the UN? The same UN that even this morning has such a difficult time letting our people in the front door. The same UN that has such a difficult time finding the funds to allow us, the staff, to even process registrations. The problem is for our people, we must be able to begin to assert the principle that nothing about us without us. Nothing happens about us without us. And that includes here at the UN. In a recent research project, my students at Howard University found that over 90 reparations commissions have been created just in the United States alone since the killing of George Floyd. 40% in local municipalities, 40% in universities, churches and nonprofits, even states like the state of California have brought people together. They have come up with programs that include the creation of freedmen's bureaus to give resources to people of African descent, and boards created by Black people to determine their own terms of their reparation. That includes a plan in Evanston, Ohio to provide reparations based on a record of housing discrimination that took place from 1919 to 1969, systematically extracting wealth from Black communities and creating equity in the pockets of white communities through home ownership. That includes programs that have been happening on the local level all across the country, driven by grassroots citizens. Why can't those grassroots citizens begin to determine their own terms for what reparations should look like? Where's the role of African spirituality? Where's the role of our own cultural icons? When are we going to be able to prize and value some of our own ethical and moral principles as a people and bring those to our legal analysis? In April of 2022, Harvard University put up a $100 million endowment fund and a report that was also 100 pages, deciding that it was going to give reparations because the university benefited from enslavement. These recommendations for how to use that money included scholarships for students who are already at Howard and for professors at Black universities to go to lecture at Harvard, benefiting the Harvard students. A similar reparations program was proposed by the Church of England, also for $100 million, where a panel of experts selected by the Church of England itself would decide how to administer this fund, even though it was determined that the Church of England has already been documented to have made $1.3 billion from slavery. So whenever reparations is framed not as justice, not as repair, but as charity, or as a gift, the terms will always be self-serving. It wouldn't make sense for a bank robber to determine how much of the heist he will return, or select a panel of experts to dole out the stolen money according to his own vision of what's fair. So this is perhaps the most appropriate legal question to ponder. Crimes against humanity, governed by the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, adopted in 1988, is one perhaps interesting legal concept that we could apply to what happened to our people. Genocide, determined by the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by the General Assembly in 1948, shortly after the Holocaust, is another interesting legal claim that could be brought. But so far, we've left it to the scholars of the past, the lawyers of the past, the white scholars, the white lawyers, to determine the bounds of our legal imagination, to determine the narrow strictures that we will use to determine what justice looks like for our own people. So I come to you today with a novel proposal that we begin to think our own thoughts, propose our own vision of justice, and implement that justice as part of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. So I also propose today that we create a new bar association, including lawyers and non-lawyers, to discuss what it means to be repaired in 2023 for crimes that have been done to us and are continuing to be done to us for over 500 years. Over 500 years. So for your consideration, Madam Chair, I propose that today we create a new community of legal thinkers that's not limited to lawyers, but includes anyone who is passionate about justice. And we come together and demand that many of the states in this room that have benefited from the legacy of our oppression start the process of apology and reparation, but not on their terms, but on our terms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hansford, on behalf of